She was asleep in seat 19A when the Navy SEAL captain gripped her shoulder and said, "Wake the pilot." But the cockpit was empty. The plane was flying itself. And the woman he just woke up. She was the only person alive who could stop them all from disappearing forever. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching, also like and subscribe for more stories. The plane cut through the night sky like a silver arrow, its engines humming steadily as it carried 300 souls across the Atlantic Ocean. Inside the dimly lit cabin, most passengers had surrendered to sleep, lulled by the monotonous drone of the flight. But in seat 19A, near the emergency exit, a woman slept more deeply than the rest. Her head rested against the cold window, her breathing slow and even, her face peaceful in the shadows. Her name, according to her passport, was Sarah Mitchell. A software engineer from Boston, traveling to London for a tech conference. Everything about her seemed ordinary. Her carry-on bag held a laptop, some books, and the usual travel essentials. Her clothing was casual but professional. Nothing about her suggested she was anything more than another tired traveler on a red-eye flight. But appearances can be deceiving. 3 rows behind her, a man sat rigidly upright despite the late hour. His eyes never closed, never wandered to a phone or a book. He wore civilian clothes, jeans and a dark jacket, but something about his posture screamed military training. His name was Marcus Chen, and he was a Navy SEAL captain, though no one on the plane knew that. His mission was classified, his presence on this flight no accident. For the past 2 hours, Marcus had been watching the woman in 19A. Not obviously, not in a way that would draw attention, but with the patient focus of a predator observing prey. He had memorized the curve of her shoulder, the way her fingers occasionally twitched in sleep, the rhythm of her breathing. He was waiting for something, though he wasn't entirely sure what. His orders had been strange, even by military standards. Board Flight 447 to London. Observe passenger in seat 19A. Wait for the signal. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. No explanation. No background. Just a photograph of the woman and those cryptic instructions. Marcus had been a SEAL for 12 years. He had jumped out of helicopters into hostile territory, swum through freezing water to plant explosives, survived firefights that had killed better men. But sitting on a commercial airplane, watching a sleeping woman, might have been the strangest mission of his career. The flight attendants moved quietly through the cabin, collecting trash and offering water to the few passengers still awake. The pilot had announced they were halfway across the Atlantic, cruising smoothly at 35,000 feet. Everything seemed routine, peaceful even. Then Marcus's phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out carefully, shielding the screen from nearby passengers. A single encrypted message glowed on the display, signal confirmed. Engage now. Protocol Omega. His blood went cold. Protocol Omega. He had heard whispers about it in classified briefings, but never thought he would actually see it activated. It meant the situation had escalated beyond anyone's expectations. It meant the woman in 19A was far more dangerous than she appeared. Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up. His movements were calm, controlled, but his heart was racing. He stepped into the aisle and walked forward, his eyes locked on the sleeping woman. Other passengers glanced at him curiously, but no one questioned him. Why would they? He was just another passenger stretching his legs. When he reached row 19, Marcus paused. Up close, the woman looked even more innocent. Her face was relaxed in sleep, her lips slightly parted. She wore a simple silver necklace and small earrings. Her hands were folded in her lap, no rings, no watch, nothing remarkable. But Marcus knew better than to trust appearances. He reached out and placed his hand firmly on her shoulder. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low but commanding. "Ma'am, you need to wake up." The woman didn't stir. She remained deeply asleep, as if his touch hadn't registered at all. Marcus tightened his grip slightly. "Ma'am, this is urgent." You need to wake up now. Still nothing. Her breathing remained steady, unchanged. A flight attendant noticed the commotion and hurried over. Sir, is there a problem? Is this passenger ill? Marcus ignored her. His training kicked in, his senses heightening. Something was wrong. Very wrong. A person didn't sleep this deeply, not naturally. He leaned closer, studying her face, and noticed something he had missed before. Her eyelids weren't completely relaxed. Beneath them, her eyes were moving rapidly, the telltale sign of REM sleep or something else entirely. Sir, please return to your seat, the flight attendant insisted, her voice rising with concern. If there's a medical emergency, I need to. Wake the pilot, Marcus said sharply, cutting her off. The flight attendant blinked. Excuse me. I said wake the pilot. Get him out here. Now. Sir, the pilot is flying the plane. I can't just. Marcus pulled out his military ID, flashing it quickly. I'm Captain Marcus Chen, United States Navy. This is a matter of national security. Get the pilot. Now. The flight attendant's face went pale. She had been trained to handle drunk passengers, medical emergencies, even unruly children. But a Navy officer demanding to see the pilot? That wasn't in any manual. I'll need to speak with the head flight attendant, she stammered. Please, just return to your seat, Anne. There's no time, Marcus interrupted. He turned back to the woman in 19A, his jaw tight. He had been told to wait for the signal, to observe. But Protocol Omega changed everything. It meant she was about to do something, or something was about to happen to her, and either way, the entire plane was in danger. By now, other passengers were starting to notice the disturbance. Heads turned, whispers spread through the cabin like wildfire. An elderly man in 20B leaned forward. What's going on? Is she okay? Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he did something that would change everything. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device, no bigger than a smartphone. It looked like nothing special, just a black rectangle with a single button. But when he pressed that button and held it near the woman's head, the device emitted a high-pitched tone, barely audible but piercing. The woman's eyes snapped open. For a moment, she stared straight ahead, disoriented, her pupils dilated. Then her gaze shifted to Marcus, and he saw it. The recognition. The instant understanding. Her body went rigid, her hands clenching the armrests. You, she whispered, her voice hoarse. You're not supposed to be here. Neither are you, Marcus replied quietly. At least, not as Sarah Mitchell. The woman's eyes darted around the cabin, taking in the curious passengers, the nervous flight attendant, the confined space. She was calculating, Marcus realized. Running through options, looking for exits, assessing threats. Just like he had been trained to do. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, louder now, her voice taking on a frightened edge. Who are you? Why are you bothering me? Good actress, Marcus thought. But not good enough. We can do this quietly, he said, leaning closer. Or we can do it the hard way. But either way, you're coming with me to speak with the pilot. I'm not going anywhere with you, she hissed. I don't care what kind of ID you have. You can't just. She stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes had caught on something over Marcus's shoulder, and her face went from angry to terrified in an instant. Marcus turned, following her gaze. At first, he didn't see anything unusual. Just passengers watching the confrontation with varying degrees of interest. But then he noticed him. A man in 12C, wearing a business suit and reading glasses. There was nothing remarkable about him, except for one detail. His right hand was inside his jacket, and the bulge there was unmistakable. A gun. Marcus's training took over. In one fluid motion, he grabbed the woman from 19A and pulled her into the aisle, positioning himself between her and the armed man. "Get down," he ordered. But she didn't get down. Instead, she grabbed his arm with surprising strength and yanked him toward the back of the plane. "We need to move. Now." "What the hell is?" "He's not alone," she cut him off, pulling harder. "There are at least 3 of them on this plane. Maybe more. And if they're here, then the pilots are already compromised." Marcus's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "The pilots aren't flying this plane anymore," she said, her eyes wild with fear. "Someone else is. And when we reach the mid-Atlantic, they're going to make us disappear." Before Marcus could respond, the man in 12C stood up. He wasn't reaching for his gun. Instead, he pulled out a phone and spoke into it, loud enough for several rows to hear. "She's awake. Initiate lockdown." Immediately, 2 more passengers stood up. A woman in 8A and a man in 23D. They moved with military precision, blocking the aisles, their faces blank and professional. The other passengers started to panic, some screaming, others fumbling with seatbelts. The head flight attendant rushed toward Marcus. "Sir, what's happening? Who are these people?" "Get everyone seated and calm," Marcus ordered. "And get me into that cockpit." "I can't just." "Do it," he barked. "This plane has been hijacked." The word hijacked sent shockwaves through the cabin. Passengers screamed louder. A child started crying. The flight attendant's hands shook as she reached for the intercom. But before she could speak, the lights went out. The cabin plunged into darkness, lit only by the dim emergency floor lights. Screams filled the air. Marcus felt the woman from 19A press against his back, her breathing rapid but controlled. "They've cut the main power," she whispered in his ear. "They're taking full control." "Who are they?" Marcus demanded. "Does it matter?" she shot back. "Right now, we need to get to the cockpit before they lock us out completely." Marcus made a split-second decision. He grabbed her hand and started pushing through the panicking passengers toward the front of the plane. The armed operatives tried to block them, but in the chaos and darkness, it was nearly impossible. Marcus used his training, moving efficiently, neutralizing threats without causing a full-blown fight that might endanger innocent passengers. They reached the cockpit door. It was sealed shut, as it should be. But Marcus knew that meant nothing if the pilots inside were compromised. "Can you open it?" he asked the woman. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she pulled a small device from her pocket, something that looked like a keycard but with blinking lights. She pressed it against the door's locking mechanism. "Where did you get that?" Marcus asked. "Long story," she muttered, focused on the device. "But if you're wondering if I'm really a software engineer, the answer is no." "Then who are you?" The device beeped. The cockpit door's lock clicked open. "Someone who should have died 6 months ago," she said quietly. Then she pulled the door open. The cockpit was empty. Not just devoid of pilots, but completely empty. The seats were there, the controls were blinking and functioning, but there were no human beings inside. The plane was flying itself. "What the hell?" Marcus breathed. The woman pushed past him and sat in the captain's seat. Her fingers flew over the controls, pressing buttons, checking screens. "It's an override system," she explained rapidly. "Remote piloting. The plane is being controlled from the ground. Or more likely, from another aircraft nearby." "That's impossible," Marcus said. "Security protocols would never allow." "Security protocols were written by people who could be bought," she interrupted. "I should know. I helped design them." Marcus stared at her. "Who are you?" She finally looked at him, and he saw exhaustion and fear in her eyes. "My real name is Dr. Elena Volkov. I'm a systems engineer, formerly with the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. 3 years ago, I was part of a team that developed a technology called Phantom Protocol. It was designed to allow emergency remote control of aircraft in case of pilot incapacitation or hijacking. That sounds like a good thing, Marcus said slowly. It was. Until it wasn't. Elena turned back to the controls. The technology was stolen. Sold to the highest bidder. And now it's being used to hijack planes, make them disappear, all without anyone knowing how. The pilots think they're in control until suddenly, they're not. And by the time they realize what's happening, it's too late. Marcus felt his world tilting. How many planes? For that I know of. All vanished over the ocean. No distress calls, no wreckage, nothing. The official reports say mechanical failure or pilot error. But I know the truth. And that's why they've been trying to kill me for 6 months. But why are you on this plane? Marcus asked. If you knew. I didn't know, Elena said bitterly. I thought I was finally safe. I thought I had covered my tracks well enough. But somehow they found me. And they activated Phantom Protocol on this flight specifically because I'm on it. They're going to crash us into the ocean and blame it on me, the crazy engineer who went rogue. One final loose end, tied up forever. The plane suddenly banked hard to the left. Passengers screamed outside the cockpit. Marcus grabbed the doorframe to steady himself. Can you override it? He demanded. Can you take back control? Elena's fingers flew over the keyboard built into the console. I'm trying. But they've locked me out. They've changed all the access codes, added new encryption layers. It's like they knew I would try this. Because they did know, a voice said behind them. Marcus spun around. The man from 12C stood in the cockpit doorway, gun in hand, pointed directly at Elena. Dr. Volkov, the man said with a cold smile. We've been waiting for you to wake up. The sedative in your coffee at the airport was designed to keep you asleep until we were over the mid-Atlantic. But then Captain Chen here had to interfere. He shifted his aim to Marcus. You weren't part of the plan, Captain. Bad luck for you. Marcus's mind raced. The man had a gun, but he was standing in a narrow doorway. If Marcus could. Don't try it, the man warned, as if reading his thoughts. I'm a professional. You'd be dead before you moved an inch. What do you want? Elena asked, her voice steady despite the gun pointed at her. What do we want? The man laughed. We want you to watch. We want you to see your creation do exactly what we designed it to do. And then we want you to die knowing that every future plane that disappears, every passenger that vanishes into the ocean, it's all because of you. You're insane, Marcus growled. No, Captain. We're businessmen. There's a lot of money in making planes disappear. Insurance fraud, political assassinations, smuggling. The applications are endless. And Dr. Volkov's technology makes it all possible. Elena's hands never stopped moving on the keyboard. You won't get away with this. Too many people know about Phantom Protocol now. Too many agencies are investigating. Are they? The man's smile widened. Or are those agencies using technology we sold them? Are those investigators flying on planes that we can control? You see, Doctor, you only discovered the tip of the iceberg. Phantom Protocol isn't just on this plane. It's everywhere. The aircraft shuddered violently. Warning alarms began blaring from the control panel. Outside the cockpit door, passengers screamed in terror. We're going down, Elena said, her face pale. They've put us into a dive. The man in the doorway chuckled. Goodbye, Dr. Volkov. Goodbye, Captain Chen. It's been. He never finished the sentence. Because at that moment, the plane lurched so violently that even he lost his balance. Marcus didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, grabbed the man's gun arm, and slammed it against the doorframe. The gun went off, the shot deafening in the confined space, but the bullet went wild, embedding itself in the cockpit ceiling. Marcus and the man grappled, fighting for control of the weapon. Behind them, Elena never stopped typing, never stopped working on the controls, even as the plane's nose tilted downward, even as the artificial horizon on the screen showed them plummeting toward the ocean. The fight was brutal and short. Marcus had been trained in hand-to-hand combat by the best instructors the Navy had. But this man was good too, trained by someone, somewhere. For 30 seconds, it was unclear who would win. Then Elena shouted, "I'm in. I've got partial control." The distraction was enough. The man's eyes flickered toward her for just a fraction of a second. Marcus drove his elbow into the man's throat, grabbed the gun, and brought it down hard on his temple. The man collapsed. Marcus turned to Elena. "Can you pull us out of this dive?" "Working on it," she shouted back, her fingers flying. The plane was shaking so violently now that loose items were flying around the cockpit. The altimeter was spinning downward at a terrifying rate. 30,000 feet. 25,000. 20,000. "Elena. I know." Sweat poured down her face. "The system is fighting me. They're still trying to override my override. It's like playing tug-of-war with a plane." 15,000 feet. The ocean was getting closer. Then, miraculously, the nose started to lift. Slowly at first, then faster. The violent shaking subsided. The warning alarms quieted. By the time they reached 8,000 feet, the plane had leveled out. Marcus slumped against the wall, breathing hard. "Did we just?" "We survived," Elena finished. "For now. For now." She pointed at the fuel gauge. "They burned through most of our fuel with those maneuvers. We can't make it to London. We can't even make it back to New York. Then where can we go?" Elena studied the navigation screen. "There's a small airfield in Iceland. If we're lucky, if they don't try to take control again, if the winds are with us, we might make it. And if we're not lucky?" She met his eyes. "Then we go down in the North Atlantic, and no one ever knows what really happened to Flight 447. Marcus thought about the 300 passengers in the cabin behind them. People who had boarded this plane thinking they were going to London for business meetings or vacations or family visits. People who had no idea they'd been pawns in a game of technological terror. "Then we'd better get lucky," he said. The next 2 hours were the longest of Marcus's life. He secured the unconscious operative and his 2 companions who had been subdued by flight attendants once the panic died down. He helped calm the passengers, explaining that there had been an attempted hijacking but that it was now under control. He didn't mention that the plane was being flown by a rogue engineer being hunted by international criminals, or that they were running on fumes over the Atlantic Ocean. Elena stayed in the cockpit, her eyes never leaving the controls. She had to manually fight the override system every few minutes, keeping just enough control to maintain their course toward Iceland. Her hands shook with exhaustion, her face was gray with stress, but she never stopped. When the rugged coast of Iceland finally appeared on the horizon, a cheer went up from the passengers who could see it through the windows. But Marcus and Elena knew they weren't safe yet. Landing without enough fuel, on an unfamiliar runway, while fighting a remote piloting system that was still trying to wrest control was going to be the most dangerous part of the entire ordeal. "I'm going to need your help," Elena said as they approached the airport. "I'll handle the flight controls, but I need you to manage the landing gear, the flaps, everything else. Can you do that?" Marcus looked at the bewildering array of switches and buttons. "I'll figure it out." "You'll have to do better than that." She was right. For the next 20 minutes, Elena called out instructions and Marcus followed them, flipping switches and pulling levers as directed. The approach was rough, the plane wobbling and shaking as Elena fought for every inch of control. "Landing gear down," Marcus reported. "Flaps at 30%, Elena ordered. "Done." "We're coming in too fast," she muttered. But if I slow down any more, we'll stall. This is going to be rough. The runway rushed up to meet them. Marcus braced himself. In the cabin, flight attendants shouted for passengers to assume crash positions. The wheels hit the tarmac hard, bouncing once, twice. The plane swerved dangerously to the left. Elena fought the controls, sweat pouring down her face. Metal screamed against asphalt. Sparks flew from somewhere underneath them. But slowly, impossibly, the plane slowed. By the time they came to a complete stop at the far end of the runway, every nerve in Marcus's body was singing with adrenaline. But they were down. They were alive. Emergency vehicles surrounded the plane within minutes. Icelandic police boarded, along with medical personnel. The 3 operatives were taken into custody. Passengers were evacuated, shaken but mostly unharmed. Marcus and Elena were the last to leave the cockpit. As they walked down the aisle, several passengers reached out to touch Elena's arm, to thank her. She nodded numbly, barely seeing them. On the tarmac, wrapped in emergency blankets despite the fact that it was summer, Marcus and Elena stood together watching the sun rise over Iceland's volcanic landscape. What happens now? Marcus asked. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Now I testify. I tell every agency, every government, every airline about Phantom Protocol. I burn it all down, no matter who it implicates. They'll try to kill you again. Probably. Then I guess you'll need protection." She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since they'd landed. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." Marcus thought about the empty cockpit, the unconscious passengers, the dive toward the ocean. He thought about technology that could make planes disappear and the men who would use it for profit. "Because someone needs to," he said simply. "And because you saved 300 lives today. That's worth protecting." Elena smiled, tired but genuine. "You know, when I woke up in seat 19A and saw you standing over me, I thought you were one of them. I thought I was dead. When I got the order to wake you, I thought you were a terrorist. We were both wrong." "Yeah," Marcus agreed. "We were." As the sun climbed higher, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, investigators began boarding the plane. There would be debriefings, interrogations, international incidents. The story of Flight 447 would dominate headlines for weeks. But standing there on the tarmac, Marcus and Elena knew the real story, the one that might never be fully told. The story of how a sleeping woman in seat 19A held the key to exposing a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government and industry. The story of how a Navy SEAL captain followed his orders into the strangest mission of his career. The story of how 300 people almost became statistics in a technological nightmare. "You know what's funny?" Elena said softly. "What?" "I was never supposed to be on this flight. My original booking was for tomorrow. But I changed it last minute because I had a bad feeling. Some instinct telling me to run, to keep moving." Marcus considered that. "Maybe that instinct saved your life. Maybe it saved all our lives. Or maybe," Elena said, her eyes distant, "maybe they wanted me to change flights. Maybe this was exactly what they planned all along." The thought sent a chill down Marcus's spine. But before he could respond, an official-looking woman in a dark suit approached them, flanked by 2 security officers. "Dr. Volkov. Captain Chen. I'm Agent Morrison with Interpol. We need to speak with both of you immediately. There's been a development." "What kind of development?" Marcus asked. Agent Morrison's face was grim. 40 minutes ago, another plane disappeared over the Pacific. Flight 889 from Tokyo to Los Angeles. 347 passengers. No distress call, no warning. It's just, gone." Elena's face went white. "They're accelerating the timeline. They know I survived. They know I'll talk. So they're demonstrating what they can do before I have a chance to stop them. Can you stop them? Agent Morrison asked. Elena looked at the aircraft behind them, at the passengers being loaded into buses, at the sunrise over Iceland. Then she turned to Marcus, and he saw steel in her eyes. The determination of someone who had created something terrible and was now willing to sacrifice everything to destroy it. Yes, she said firmly. Yes, I can stop them. But I'm going to need help. A lot of help. Marcus didn't hesitate. You've got it. Agent Morrison nodded. Then let's get started. Every minute we waste is another minute they can use Phantom Protocol. Another plane that could disappear. As they walked toward the waiting vehicles, Marcus glanced back one more time at Flight 447, sitting at the end of the runway. Seat 19A was visible through one of the windows, the seat where Elena had been sleeping just a few hours ago. The seat where everything had changed. He had woken the pilot, just as his orders commanded. He just never expected the pilot to be the passenger. And he certainly never expected that waking her would start a chain of events that would expose one of the most dangerous technologies ever created. But that's exactly what had happened. The woman sleeping in 19A hadn't been running from danger. She had been the key to stopping it all along.